So today the Heart Sutra will be recited in Kalmykia language. Kalmyk. Oh, she's not here. Oh. So according to the Tibetan lunar calendar, as I said yesterday, today is the death anniversary of Tsongkhapas. And so all the followers of different traditions of Tibetan Buddhism, mainly the followers of Tsongkhapas himself, the people of the Gaelic tradition, do make offerings, pujas today. And so in Kalmyk, this day is actually considered as the New Year. And so this 25th day of the 10th Tibetan month for Kalmykians are their New Year. So I would like to greet you all and say Happy New Year to you all for the Kalmykians. So it's been rather coincidental here that the Kalmykians are going to recite the Heart Sutra in their language. I prostrate to the Arya triple gem. Thus did I hear at one time the Bhagavan was dwelling on the mass of Vulture Mountain in Rajagriha together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the category of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Sharadottiputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra. Likewise, all phenomena are empty, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Sharadottiputra. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element, no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment, Shariputra. Therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared: Tat yatha om gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhi swaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, in the profound perfection of wisdom, train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagwan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagwan having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharadoti Putra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety along with the world of gods, humans, Asuras and Gandharvas were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagwan.
Yılın tösün ürüsün, yiyece zerrek olsun de, nasıl tösü şaradvatin kövün, bolun bodhisattva mahasattva, kodukten öder terespişerikte, kamık töksün nökütlerin, bolun tengir kömün, asuri, kandarva, sehte yırtımcı basısın, yılın tösün ürüsüne zerrek elerge maktav. Yılın tösün ürüsün birgin çinde kösüne zürkün gidik, iki kölüne soğuduruz doğusu. Vay. 맞아.
I bow down to the mother of the conquerors of the three times, the perfection of wisdom, inexpressible by words and thoughts, which is unproduced and ceased like the entity of the sky, the object of wisdom, of unique knowledge. That yatam gate para sangate bodhis. Gate para sangate bodhis swaha. The salutation verse from Abhisamaya Alankara by Maitreya, by the knower of all, hearers seeking pacification are led to peace. By the knower of paths, those benefiting migrating beings accomplish the welfare of the world by the perfect possession of it. The subduers teach the varieties possessing all aspects to these mothers of the Buddha, together with those of hearers and bodhisattvas. Homage. Salutation verse from Nagarjuna's Muddha Madhyamaka Karika. He who taught dependent origination, no cessation and no origination, no annihilation, no permanence, no coming, no going, neither different, no same. This thorough calming of the conceptions and elaborations to you, who is supreme speaker among all fully enlightened Buddhas, I pay homage. Let's say the words taking refuge and bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. By the accumulations of merit and wisdom I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Two more times. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. By the accumulations of merit and wisdom I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I pay homage. So the kind and skillful master, Buddha, who appeared in India and turned the wheel of Dharma, gave his teachings around 2,600 years ago. Now we are in the 21st century. So in this 21st century, places where Buddhism had not spread in the past, where people are educated and are taking interest in Buddhism. Generally, people who are rather not interested in religion also have taken interest in Buddhism and has actually praised Buddhism. Even Einstein himself, he has praised Buddhism. He said that in the future, if there is any religion which can go together with parallel with science, it would be Buddhism. So this is what he had said. So this seems to be true. Towards at the end of the 20th century and now in the beginning of the 21st century, through science and technology, people have now are now paying attention to the mind and workings of the mind, and different states of mind and thought processes, which can also have which affect our health. Therefore, for our health, people's health in this life, also happiness and welfare of sentient family members as well as in society, and so people have taken really real interest in tackling the problems that are there. So Buddhism mainly is not just based on blind faith, but it looks for the reality of things. So this is how Buddhism goes about. So with regard to searching for reality, of course, there is through science, of course, people have been able to explain the very subtle particles, as well as neurons, very subtle particles of the brain cells. So these have come through experiments, research, and analysis, investigation. So similarly, with regard to the working the system of mind, with regard to psychology and system of mind, the modern science is rather like very at a very beginner's sort of stage. So scientists so far have been checking into the external objects and not so much into the internal world of the mind. And then when they take interest in the internal world of the mind, so they find that the most extensive explanation of mind and its working system of the mind and so forth are found in the Indian tradition. Because we talk about in the Indian tradition, we talk about the development of concentration, single-pointed concentration, and because of that, you also have various degrees of presentation of various degrees of subtlety of mind. And so, with regard to psychology and the system of working of the mind, it is found more extensively in the Indian Indian thought, as particularly Buddhist thought. And so people are really taking some new interest in these systems. So it's places where Buddhism had not spread in the past. When people are taking interest in Buddhism, with regard to us who are traditionally Buddhist, we should study and be able to know what our faith actually teaches. And thereby we should be able to follow the view, the philosophical view and the conduct as it is taught in the teaching of the Buddha, and be able to follow the message of Buddha as accordingly. So without doing this, without studying and practicing, I mean, so we should be able to show the example to other people through our own practice and through our body, speech, and mind of the teaching of the Buddha, which we are supposed to be professing, to be following it. So otherwise, people would say, oh, people who would say they are Buddhists, I mean, do not really, there's nothing much they can say about what their own teaching, and so this is not good. And so we, as traditional Buddhists, should be able to recognize the treasure that we have, the cultural heritage and treasure. So when we talk about spirituality or religion, it's not about having some temple and visiting temple and so forth, but it has to be internalized within ourselves. What we study and contemplate has to be we should be able to put effort in studying. So the Buddhist republics of the Russian Federation, 3 of them, from these three republics, people have come, and so I'm giving an introductory teaching on Buddhism. And then there are more Tibetans from Tibet. So as I said till yesterday, I started teaching the 3 principles of aspects of the path. So regarding the liberation, it has to come about through the practice of and cultivation of renunciation. So although our goal is liberation, what we need is use our intelligence and wisdom and meditate or gain insight into the reality of things, emptiness. So this is we have to combine single-pointed concentration and vipassana together, and so therefore we need to cultivate wisdom. So wisdom here particularly refers to the wisdom realizing selflessness. And so that is about the training of the wisdom. In order to have that, we need single-pointed concentration. Right now, our mind is rather distracted through excitement and also laxity and so forth. The different distractions outside. We are not able to stay on our object. Even if we meditate on emptiness or selflessness, we are not able to focus continuously, but we get easily distracted. It's like trying to make fire, but not being able to actually, just being able to start the fire, but not being able to ignite the thing fully. And so what we need is this concentration, single-pointedly focusing on what we are meditating on, and therefore, through that, what we can build is the power of concentration. Otherwise, our mind is always going off and on from the focus. Therefore, it is important to develop single-pointed concentration, which is also called the training of concentration. In order to be successful in this, we need mindfulness and introspection or vigilance. Now, this starts with the practice of morality, the training of morality. The subtle distraction and excitements can be recognized when we reach a subtler level of mind. So through the development of mindfulness and introspection, As your introspection and mindfulness gains strength more and more, then you'll be able to develop concentration, single-pointed concentration, where you'll be able to also, I mean, in the process of it, you'll be able to overcome through mindfulness introspection, those of the subtle excitement and mental excitement and laxity. So this is how we should proceed, building up from morality to concentration to wisdom. And so we have, in order to be able to analyze things, we need, with intelligence, we need this human mind. Animals do not have this potential. So although our goal is liberation, but we need also the human life, I mean, to have a human body, a human life, in order to be able to progress along the path. No. His Holiness is saying that people who have never had Tibetan butter tea, they call it soup when they're in Tibet. When people Tibetans give it to them, it's called soup. So Tsongkhapas sees in the three principal aspects of the path. By reflecting on the rarity of finding human life, and also understanding that this life is there's no way we can actually lose time. And similarly, in the Sakya tradition, they say if you are attached to this life, then you are not a religious person. If you create karmas that would lead you to lower realms of existence in the next life, then you'll always have suffering. So rather than doing that, if you create the 10 virtuous actions, if you create the 10 non-virtuous actions of killing and so forth, then you are actually creating karma for lower realms of existence. And, whereas if you create the 10 virtuous actions, then you create karma for higher realms of existence, such as human life. And even if you may have again a human rebirth or higher rebirth in the next life, but still, because you are still in samsara, we are rather under the sway of our negative thoughts and emotions. And so we are almost like swayed by the negative thoughts and emotions, but we are not able to see the shortcomings of these negative thoughts and emotions, and we voluntarily kind of indulge ourselves in these, such as being attached to oneself and one's own side, and being hating others. And so people who are able to do that, not being able to recognize the shortcomings of the delusions, and people sometimes, the world consider those who are able to be emotionally, swayed, rather more successful in life and so forth. So when it comes to one's own interests, you should practice contentment and practice. So even the animals, like dogs and cats, when they find their masters rather angry, they even run away from the master. Whereas if the master is rather kind and loving to show love to them, then they also are attracted to the master. So this undisciplined mind, the untamed mind, is something which even the animals feel to be something unwanted. So we as humans, of course, we have to really give a close thought to it. So even as a human, even if we have found this human life, if we rather let our life be swayed by these negative thoughts and emotions, then we may not be so different from the animals. So the experiences which have to do more with the sensory perceptions, even the animals can enjoy them. Whereas they are not able to use the mind much, as with all kinds of thoughts like us humans. So the way they think is not so complicated like humans. And therefore, unless we are not able to tame our undisciplined mind, then of course we would be creating more problems in society, and we would be worse than the animals. And therefore, we have to look at we have to see the shortcomings of being attached to the pleasures of this life as well as pleasures of the next life, and thereby cultivate or develop that of the thought of true renunciation. So with regard to liberation, which is our goal, what we need to understand is that it is not some kind of an abode where we can reach a place like a heaven or something, but in Buddhism, This liberation means being free from this bondage of our the the negative thoughts and emotions. What this binds us to is the impure psychophysical aggregates. When you are out of this bondage, then you reach liberation, which means it has to be developed within the mind. So, helped by this thought to definitely emerge out of samsara, then if you cultivate concentration and wisdom, trainings of concentration and wisdom, by using the antidote to the grasping a true existence of things, you reach liberation. Of course, even when you reach mere liberation or freedom from the defilements which needs to be overcome, eliminated from our mind, of course, that freedom from the delusions, defilements is peaceful, the state of peace. So, because it's totally free from all kinds of defects, it's also excellent. So, this is true happiness, true peace. So, for individuals, this is the true peace. So, but if you say, if we can reach that kind of liberation, that should satisfy us. But if you look at the human society, if somebody is really knowledgeable but very selfish, then such a person would be considered rather immoral. So somebody who's totally selfish and only thinking about himself or herself would be considered not good in society. So through the practice of the three trainings of morality, concentration, and wisdom, even if you reach the liberation and not think about or work for other sentient beings who are still suffering in. And so in one of the tantras it is said that the life of an Shravakas, arhats, are lower, who have no love towards their own children. So we are full. So even if when you reach that kind of arhatship, they are not ignorant about the true nature of things, but then there is still some shortcoming in them, which is that they are not able to see the varieties or the multiplicity of things precisely as they are, and then they are not able to help other sentient beings in accordance with their needs by knowing their predispositions. So without being able to tell what the sentient beings need, of course, there's no way they can actually help them accordingly. So, as it is said, those who are not trained enough, if teaching emptiness would be rather harmful. So, similarly, if you do not know the predispositions, the mental inclinations, and so forth of the sentient beings, and give some teachings, they will not. These teachings may not be suitable for them, and then they might say, "Oh, this teacher is not able to teach according to what I need," and so forth. And so what you need is not only to overcome delusions, but also even the stains of the delusions, which are called the cognitive obscurations. And therefore, there's no way other than looking for that of enlightenment, full enlightenment, or omniscient state of mind of a Buddhahood. Of course, when you reach reaching the arhatship of Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, good, of course. But of course, those who do not know more than the path that leads to such goal, of course, are not to be blamed to work for such a goal. But then those who profess to be following Mahayana tradition, of course, if you compare the goal of that you are looking for, Buddhahood, to the arhatship, then you find that the arhatship alone is not enough. And so you look for enlightenment. So although the arhats from Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas may not have delusions, but then there may be some sense of the doubt about things because of their lack of knowledge about it. Although they do not have all the negative thoughts and emotions, but then they still have some type of ignorance and also self-cherishing attitude. And therefore, those who have studied the Mahayana teachings and know the Mahayana path process, they will be able to tell that the practice of bodhicitta is indispensable, something. So if you say that by cultivating bodhicitta, actually you are not able to fulfill your goal, that shows your ignorance. So as it is said by Maitreya in this prayer of bodhicitta is the factor which shows the path to higher realms of existence, which leads you away from the lower realms of existence and leads you to higher realms, and then it leads you to that deathless state. And so with regard to showing restraint, restraining from negative actions, only thinking that, oh, if I do this, I will be harmed. Or if compared to that, it is better to, so that's more from a selfish motive. But rather than thinking about the suffering of sentient beings. So if you have real love and compassion towards others, then restraining from the negative actions would be much more powerful. So you will not actually harm others with these love and compassion. And therefore, bodhicitta is the best means to accumulate merit and also to overcome the delusions. So with the help of the bodhicitta, I mean, even your meditation on emptiness is not meant solely for overcoming merely the delusions. So with regard to meditation on emptiness, there's great difference between whether it is complemented by bodhicitta or not, or with selfish motive. So bodhicitta can lead you to the liberation, and so with something which you cannot attain through selfish motive can be attained with the help of bodhicitta. So what can be achieved even merely through selfish motive for one's own, to attain liberation for oneself, I mean, that can also be attained by bodhicitta. So if you do not know about the Mahayana and have not really studied the teachings of Mahayana, such as those texts written by Master Nagarjuna and his disciples and so forth, then you find that it's indispensable for you to cultivate bodhicitta. And so bodhicitta is that wish to reach the perfect enlightenment for the benefit of others. And so there are two aspirations or intentions there. One is that of the aspiration to help others, and the other is the aspiration to reach highest enlightenment, Buddhahood. So the aspiration to help others comes as a causal factor for bodhicitta, and the aspiration for the Buddhahood is actually associated or is together with bodhicitta. So in order to be able to benefit others, benefiting others here referring to leading others to the highest goal of enlightenment, what is known as the non-abiding nirvana, the Buddhahood, mainly. And so you have to know that the suffering and then the karma created by delusions, and then the delusions as well as the taints left by them are something which we can actually overcome from within our mind stream. So unless you understand that possibility, that you see that possibility of the delusions, the defilements being that the defilements can be overcome, I mean, just merely saying, "Oh, may I reach enlightenment," and so forth, I mean, would be just blind faith. If you don't use your intelligence correctly, then you would be carried away by what others say. One Lama would say, "Oh, this is the way," and then you would think, "Oh, I mean, this is what it is," and believe in it. And then you meet another Lama and he says something else, and then you again believe that, and then there's contradiction within yourself. So it would be like a fool being driven anywhere the others like to. And therefore you need to study the Dharma, develop this wisdom or that arises through listening or studying the teaching, which is not so powerful. But you, having learned, having studied the things, then what you need to do is reflect on it, give thought to it, the meaning. You don't leave it just as it is taught in the text, but you need to reflect again, over and over again. And then you also have to compare the different treatises and compare the different texts, such as those of the tantric texts, which are we as Tibetan Buddhists follow Tantra, and then also we need to check the teachings with the texts on epistemology, and then find some conviction. And so that kind of I mean, through this, what we develop is the wisdom arising through reflection, which is a valid cognition and valid knowledge. And then, even if somebody says something otherwise, I mean, you'll be able to say this is not right, because if you have to believe in what this other person says, then there are this and that contradiction that arise, logical contradictions. You'll be able to tell them. And so, having found this conviction, as Tsongkhapas says, by understanding the nature of the teaching, may I grow faith in the Buddha. So Master Tsongkhapas says that the Buddha's teaching the Buddha has given his teaching by knowing and understanding the things as they are correctly, and therefore by following his teaching, you'll be able to overcome all the shortcomings. So unless you understand the nature of the teaching, through reflection, by investigation and all this, then you'll be just following it, rather take it for granted and not use your intelligence. And so when you understand the truth about the teaching of the Buddha, regarding the highest enlightenment, then you will have real strong faith. So in order to understand the enlightenment, you need to understand what emptiness means. In Arya Vimukti Sena, he mentions this. The compassion looks at sentient beings, and then with wisdom you focus on enlightenment. And so with regard to taking refuge in the triple jewels, we need, as Gyaltsab also has said, we need to have understanding of emptiness. And so, with regard to bodhicitta, it has the true aspirations associated with it. So, having developed the true thought of renunciation within yourself, and having found some experience and conviction of it, then you can also think about the suffering of sentient beings who are rather under the sway of their delusions. And then you'll be able to feel compassion towards the sentient beings. And also, if you think about even the stains or the residual stains left by delusions, still there's limitation in those beings, and therefore even those who may have reached the arhatship of the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, you can still see they have limitations. And therefore, if you are able to help others according to their predispositions, interest, inclination, and their nature, and then, of course, you'll be able to give the teachings accordingly. Otherwise, we cannot do much if we do not know them. And so you'll be able to, once you reach that highest enlightenment, you'll be able to tell what is needed for sentient beings, whether some teachings are right, whether you are giving, if you give some teachings, you are giving at the right time or not, and so forth. And so you feel that because of all these limitations that we have, there's no way, it is indispensable for us to reach enlightenment or omniscient state of Buddhahood. And so when you think about the thought of renunciation, of course, we are looking at liberation from samsara and the delusions and so forth. But when this is turned around to other sentient beings, then you feel compassion. Thinking about the suffering nature of samsara, of other sentient beings, you feel compassion. But unless you understand emptiness, you will not gain true certainty about the liberation as well. As so Nagarjuna says that once you see the possibility that you have the defilements can be overcome, then when you look at other sentient beings who are rather swayed by the defilement delusions, then there's no way you can leave sentient beings alone without feeling compassion and thinking of liberating them. So this comes through based on the understanding of emptiness. And so with regard to cultivation of bodhicitta, there are two systems. One is the sevenfold instruction on cause and effect, and then the other is the equalizing and exchanging self with others. So so now we go through the text, the three principal aspects of the path. So with regard to the measure of having developed bodhicitta, it should be understood through the verse number 8, 7 and 8. And now we are on the topic of the true nature of things. And so the need for realizing reality, and then the measure of having developed this insight, and then the completion of the realization of this reality. So we are on verse number 9. Although you train in renunciation of the mind, without wisdom, which realizes ultimate reality. So ultimate reality here refers to how things actually are. So why it is important to understand it. As we had talked yesterday, the suffering is rooted in self-grasping, which actually sees things as having some true, independent kind of existence, some kind of essence in them. And as things and one's own experiences and other things outside look to us as having some essence in them, and accordingly we also cling to them as having this essence, and then therefore we create problems for ourselves. And so by believing in the appearance of the things, having, which is to say that they appear to have some essence, so we have to check whether things do have some existence from their own side, just as they appear to. So what you have to look for is how things actually are. And therefore, Buddha has also given the teaching on the two truths, the conventional and the ultimate. The conventional the truth of the concealed truth, and then the ultimate or the final truth. So conventionally, things have their existence by way of merely nominally. So on that point of view, things have some existence. And then when you look at the ultimate reality, of course, you are Kalmykians and Buratias and Russians. There's no question that you are human beings, me too. So you do not have to doubt that whether you are a human person or not. So because of that, we can talk about human rights. And then as sentient beings, we also do not want suffering, but want happiness. And we also have the right to overcome suffering and achieve happiness. So these are explained. We are talking about all these things without doing any kind of analysis into how things are. And we also talk about suffering and happiness, pain and pleasure. Of course, when we look at suffering, we do not say how suffering arises, whether the suffering is in the first moment or the second moment, and so forth. We do not go into this kind of analysis. So, of course, unless we give thought to it, we cannot understand how we are actually under the power of our delusions. So long as you are under the power of delusions and karma, you are in samsara. And when you are beyond that, you are in liberation. So the samsara and liberation can be explained on the basis of the mind. So the mind stream. Mind stream. By mind stream, do we refer to the mind during the awakened state, when we are awake or asleep or deep sleep, or at the time of death? So when we are at the time of death, in this clear light of death, of course, all these different 80 conceptions have also ceased. So when you do analyze where samsara is, and by breaking up the things in like this, of course we cannot point to finger to something being samsara or nirvana. But we have this notion of ourselves being Kalmykians or Buryatians or Tibetans. So with regards to the nature of the reality of the person, in the 22nd chapter of Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika, he has done this analysis. The person, the Tathagata is neither the form, neither the body or the aggregates, nor something other than this, that the aggregates are not in the Tathagata, nor the Tathagata in the aggregates, and so forth. And so this logic can be applied to ourselves as well. And so when you do this kind of analysis, whether the person, oneself, the I, is the aggregates or something other than that, and so forth, of course you will not be able to find anything that you can point to. So why we need to do this kind of analysis to find the true nature of self is because we are rather obsessed with the appearance of things, believing that what appears to us is actually the truth. And therefore, since it is not the case, we have to find the reality. So we make this distinction of I and you, me versus you, because of this clinging to this kind of appearance of true existence and things. And then we have to, in order to reduce that kind of clinging, we have to know the reality. And therefore, the two truths are taught by the Buddha, which of course are also the teaching on the two truths also found in the in the non-Buddhist traditions. For example, in the Sankhya school, the primal factor and this the conscious being are seen as ultimate truth, and the rest of the phenomena are seen as conventional or truth. And then in the Vaibhashikas, they talk about the two truths as well, where they even for them the two truths are rather of different natures. And similarly, it is the case with Sotrantikas. And then when we go into the those who assert the selflessness of phenomena, mainly the Madhyamaka philosophical tradition, this distinction between the two truths is made more clearly. And so Maitreya gives teaching on the instructions on the two truths and four truths, and then the three jewels in his Visamaya Lamkara. And so in order to have a genuine sense of taking refuge in the three jewels, we have to see the possibility of the truth of cessation, for which you develop the path, the true path. And through the path, when you see that the suffering and its origin can be put to an end too, and thereby reach liberation. And within ignorance, of course, there are various degrees of subtlety. Unless you are able to recognize or see the subtlest form of ignorance, and you'll not be able to see the possibility of liberation thoroughly. And therefore, in order to understand the Four Noble Truths, you have to understand the two truths. And in order to understand the Four Noble Truths well, unless you understand the truth of the cessation and path, of course, you'll not be able to see the possibility of the jewel of the Dharma, and because of that, you'll not be able to understand what the actual Sangha is, and then you will not be able to understand the Buddha. So, based on the understanding of the these truths, yeah, and then you'll be able to have a reason-based conviction in the practice of taking refuge. And therefore, in the text, it says, without wisdom, which realizes the ultimate reality, you cannot cut the root of cyclic existence. So, regarding the root of cyclic existence, within that, we have the distinction between those the afflictions which have to do with intelligence and those which are not related to intelligence. And then antidote for this is we have in the beginning practices which rather call or overcomes the strength of these the delusions, and then when you go further into practice, there are these means or real antidotes which actually overcomes the root of these delusions. So with regard to change in the outside world, you can see that when there's some cold, it can be overcome through some heat. So with regard to the relationship between the world, this earth and the sun, when we talk about how hot the places are and how cold it is, and depending on the distance from the sun or the movement of the sun and so forth. And so these two, the heat and cold, cannot stay together without one overcoming the other, or when the cold is greater, the heat is less, and when the heat is greater, the cold is less. So similarly, it is with our body. For example, if we talk about allopathic medicine, these medicines are given according to what kind of virus or bacteria are to be overcome in the body. So whichever virus or bacteria we have, accordingly the medicines are given. And so the medicines are like antidotes to these viruses. So when one is stronger, the other cannot stay any longer. And so you have to make change with. Even in the outside world, when it is the case that you have to overcome something through the opposite force, similarly it is the case with the mind. So the grasping at self-existence has to be overcome through the understanding or insight into that selflessness. So because they have the same object, but how they actually perceive the same object is completely different. So in this way, the understanding of or the insight into selflessness overcomes the grasping at self. The grasping at self actually believes in something which is not actually there. Although we kind of cling to that way things appear to us, it is not the truth, and therefore the truth is realized by this insight into selflessness, and therefore that serves as antidote to this self-grasping. And so this wisdom, afflicted intelligence cannot be overcome merely through aspirations, such as your wish to become enlightened or reach liberation, cannot overcome it. So you have to have the wisdom which realizes the truth, the reality of things, and therefore this afflicted intelligence can be overcome with a wisdom which sees the thing which is completely opposite to what it perceives. And then those of the non-afflicted intelligence, of course, are based on those afflicted intelligence, and they also can be overcome. And so it says, without the wisdom realizing ultimate reality, you cannot cut the root of cyclic existence. Because this cannot become overcome through merely prayer, nor through the cultivation of renunciation, nor through merely cultivating bodhicitta, but you need. And then Lama Tsongkhapas goes on to say, therefore strive to understand dependent arising. So with regard to this phrase, so there is sometimes explanation of things being rather positive or negative. So in praise for dependent origination, Tsongkhapas says that Buddha has given the teaching on dependent origination by seeing it and experiencing it. And so Tsongkhapa doesn't say here, strive to understand emptiness, or view of understand or emptiness or selflessness. Maybe it's easier. But then you can also think about, if it said you should understand selflessness, it can refer to the grosser form of selflessness. And then if he had said you should strive to understand emptiness, it could be understood, interpreted in terms of the emptiness understood by the Chittamatras, the non-duality of subject and object. And therefore, he doesn't say these, but he says, understand dependent origination, and dependent origination is the reasoning, the king of reasoning to prove emptiness. So the reason why it is so is because this has the potential to eliminate both the extreme views of nihilism and eternalism. Other reasonings that are used to prove selflessness or emptiness, such as the lack of one and many, may be able to do away with the extreme of permanence, but not the other. And therefore, the reasoning of dependent origination has the power to eliminate both the extremes of nihilism and permanence. So this term, dependent origination or dependent arising, according to Chone Lama Rinpoche, has the meaning of ten, or dependence, meaning that it doesn't, by that, the suchness or reality of things are not abandoned. And then by arising, he says, we also stick to the conventional reality of the world. And so, when you say that something is dependent, it shows that there is no independent existence of the thing. And when you say it's arising or originated, then there is this understanding of how it is called not nothing. And so, based on understanding of the causality of the dependence in terms of causality, then you can go into understand how different effects are come about through their causes and conditions. So this is even something which even the animals are aware of, although they may not know the terms of causality and so forth, but they know that causes and conditions give rise to their effects. And so effects are dependent on their causes and conditions. And then when you think further about the relationship between cause and effect, The effects are actually brought about by the causes, which means that the effects are helped by the causes, and the causes are, the current conditions are their helpers, or that which helps them to come about. So when you say, when the causes are called those which actually help in bringing about something, you cannot call it a helper without there being something that it helps. Without there being something which is produced, you cannot have those which produce it. So a cause has its own cause, and therefore in relation to that cause, its own cause, it's an effect. And it's a cause in relation to its own effect. And therefore, something which is a product is necessarily, generally and necessarily a cause as well. Because the effect comes about through its own cause, and it can give rise to its own effect as well. And so it is a cause in relation to its effect, and a cause and an effect in relation to its cause. So a cause is gets its name because of its effect. Although when the cause is there, the effect has not yet arisen, but then because of the effect that it gives rise to, it becomes a cause. And therefore, a cause is also merely designated, merely contingent. And therefore, you can understand how causes are dependent or related to their effects. And also, the valid cognition, their objects are mutually dependent. And self and others, good and bad, also are relative to each other. And similarly, it is the case with samsara and nirvana. And therefore, what Nagarjuna says, what is dependently arisen is said to be empty, and that is what is designated, and this is the middle path. So before this verse, Master Nagarjuna sets up the arguments from the realist Buddhist philosophical schools, who say that if there is no essence or no nature of things, then nothing can be posited. You cannot talk about cause and effect and everything, and therefore you would be a nihilist. And in response to this, Master Nagarjuna says, when I say emptiness, and in John Lama Rinpoche's text he says, emptiness doesn't mean nothingness, where things have no function at all. What it means when you say when we say emptiness, it means that there is no independent existence of things. So in this Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, where Buddha says everything is empty, can be taken literally, because things are dependent on others. Therefore, they do not have their own essence, and which doesn't mean that things do not have causes and conditions. So things are empty of any essence, independent existence, because they are dependent on others. And therefore, Nagarjuna says what is dependently arisen is to be empty, and that is designated, and therefore this is the middle path. So to us, things appear to have some kind of independent existence, which is not the reality. things exist merely by way of designation. So, if you understand the dependent origination or dependent arising in the subtlest manner, so then you'll understand why the Prasangika Madhyamikas assert that there's no essence of in things whatsoever. And therefore, the reason why Tsongkhapas says you should strive to understand dependent arising has this kind of meaning. And then verse number 10, one who sees the infallible cause and effect of all phenomena of cyclic existence, peace, and destroys all focuses of apprehension, has entered onto the path which pleases the Buddha. So the things which are in cyclic existence, samsara and nirvana, whether they are composite phenomena or non-composite, so here the cause and effect can also be understood in terms of reasoning as well as the cause and effect. So for something to exist, it has to come through the independence on others, or so while you're able to posit the relationship between cause and effect, in subtlest manner, then you'll be able to understand that the things do have their existence through dependence and not independently. So this infallibility of cause and effect can induce the understanding that there is no independent existence of things. So with that, you'll be able to overcome nihilism, which sees that the things do not exist, and destroys all focuses of apprehension or objectivity. So you have to destroy that objectivity of things. When you come to conviction that there's nothing really there objectively in existence at all, of course there is an appearance to a valid cognition. Of course, when you say, according to the Savadhantrika Madhyamakas, that things have some existence of their own, but then they ultimately are empty, still you are hanging on to some kind of objectivity of things. So Bhava Viveka, when he criticizes Buddha Palita, when they explain Nagarjuna's Mudya Madhyamaka Karika, Bhava Viveka criticizes Buddha Palita, and to that criticism, Chandrakirti has answered to Bhava Viveka. So when you understand the position of the Prasangika Madhyamakas through how Chandrakirti has explained it, whether there is the mutually accepted or locus or not, and so forth, then you'll be able to understand really precisely. What appears to us is that things have some objective existence, and that which is not the truth, because they are dependent. And so being dependent and independent are mutually exclusive phenomena. So Sheriff Singh says that first you have to has a tradition of teaching, leading disciples through first understanding the grosser level of selflessness, and then having gained some experience of it, the disciples are led into the subtle selflessness. So this seems to be very helpful. It has really helped me. When you familiarize your mind with this, then it seems that it really helps. And you will be able to see there is no person like, and then you'll be able to see that the sentient beings do not exist as it appears, as they appear to, as being some kind of a solid phenomenon there. So when you are able to understand the sentient beings do not exist the way they appear to, and then use that understanding to establish that the psychophysical aggregates also do not exist the way they appear to us. So using the understanding of negating the gross selflessness, and then going into the understanding of the subtle selflessness, I mean, it seems it helps. So it says here, you destroy all the focuses of objectification, and then you kind of destroy it. Of course, this I is merely imputed, but then if you say the person is imputed, but then the psychophysical aggregates are not merely imputed, then you still are left with some objective, something which you are objectifying. Whereas if you are able to destroy even the objectification of the objectivity of the psychophysical aggregates, I mean, there's nothing really left. So you will not be able to see anything from amongst the psychophysical aggregates as being some instance of the person at all. And so he says, such a person has entered on the path which pleases the Buddha. So when you begin to understand this selflessness, then you are beginning to actually enter into the path which pleases the Buddhas. And then verse number 11. So many of us say, when we say things have no essence, or we just think that it's nothing, there's nothing. Some even say that, oh, don't matter when something goes wrong with somebody. They say, oh, don't worry about it, everything's empty. I mean, that shows their ignorance about the meaning of emptiness. So because things are empty of nature, empty by nature, therefore they are dependently arisen. And because they are dependent on reason, we can also posit cause and effect. So it's very important to understand what is explained or taught in Madhyamaka Karika, the 24th chapter by Nagarjuna, what emptiness means, what the nature of emptiness is, and what the purpose of emptiness is. So this is really important, it's really sacred teaching. Otherwise, some say that when we talk about the ultimate nature, it is something which is beyond assertion. Of course, it's easy to say such things. Of course, this is true. But using the reasoning of dependent origination, if you can actually bring about the understanding or in the emptiness, then you will be able to bring together these two, the appearance or the dependent origination and emptiness, being compatible with each other. Otherwise, on the one hand, you may say things are empty of any inherent existence, but then you are not able to actually assert the dependent nature of things, and vice versa. So it's like called having an understanding of these two rather alternately, like when people actually make weaving. I mean, a weaver pushes one leg down and then the other is up, and the other, when the left is down, right is up, and so forth. They don't go together. And so some say that the understanding of emptiness can actually lead one to not believe in the conventional nature of things. And then they use the term, this is the enemy of emptiness. But they use the term being enemy of emptiness, and this is not true actually. And so Buddha even says in the Heart Sutra that all 5 aggregates are empty of any inherent nature. And then later on he says there's no form, no feeling, and so forth. So you have to understand that passage which comes later within the context of the earlier phrase. And then in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, the Buddha also goes through all the different subjects on which emptiness is established. And then at the end, he says, these are all merely in name, merely nominal. So by that, he shows very clearly that things are empty of any inherent existence. So otherwise, he doesn't need to say things are empty of inherent existence. So when we say talk about emptiness, it is an emptiness of something. So without that object onto which emptiness, of which the emptiness becomes the property, you can't talk of emptiness. And therefore, emptiness is not a standalone kind of phenomenon, which has nothing to do with what things are empty of. So verse number 12, so verse number 11 shows that these two, the emptiness and dependent origination, go together. And then verse number 12 shows the measure of having the complete understanding of emptiness. Rinpoche also, in the earlier part of his life, he also had meditated on emptiness being without any elaborations. And also in one of the texts written by Tsongkhapas, he says, although things do not have any objective, even to the subtlest particle, in view of others, which shows that the understanding of emptiness Tsongkhapas had at that time was not actually the precise understanding of emptiness. And therefore, in this text, he says, when the two realizations are simultaneous, where from the mere sight of infallible dependent origination concurrently destroys all modes of grasping through definite discernment, at that time the analysis of the profound view is perfected. And so Lama Tsongkhapa, in earlier part of his life, had asked whether his understanding of emptiness is according to the Madhyamaka, Savtantrika, Madhyamaka, or Prasangika. To Manjushri, the Manjushris replied, none. And then Lama Tsongkhapa further carried on with his practice in accordance with the advice of instruction of Manjushri to do purification practices, and also by meditating on one's Lama and the meditation deity as being of same nature, and making his fervent prayers to them, and so forth. So going through this arduous practice of purification and accumulation of merit in Olga, then he had this dream at one time where he saw Master Nagarjuna and his 5 disciples, amongst which was Buddha Palita. And Buddha Palita touched. So Buddha Palita was seen in the dream as this person, an Indian-looking person, who looked rather bluish, having a bluish complexion, came forward and said he was Buddha Palita and touched a text on his Lama Tsongkhapa's head in the dream. And then next morning, Lama Tsongkhapa had this true understanding and insight into emptiness. So without having to resort to a third reasoning or a third factor, he was able to use the reasoning to establish emptiness, and was able to gain true insight into emptiness. And then verse number 13 goes on to say, furthermore, appearance refutes the extreme of existence, emptiness refutes the extremes of non-existence. When you understand that emptiness arises in the form of cause and effect, you are not captivated by the view of extremes. So when you look at things, of course, the things appear to have some objective existence. And your experiences, if you reflect on them, they also seem to have this objective existence. If that were the case, if things were to have some objective existence, then they cannot be dependent on others. And therefore, through appearance, when you understand that they are actually dependent, then as you see things, you will be able to confirm that they do not have an objective existence, which does away with the extreme of permanence. And because things are empty of independent existence, therefore things, you'll be able to do away with the extreme of nihilism as well. So when you understand that emptiness arises in the form of cause and effect, of course it doesn't mean the emptiness actually becoming the cause of some effect as such, but then what it means is that emptiness means that things are dependent on others, and therefore you understand that the emptiness in the form of cause and effect. You are not captivated by the view of extremes, the extreme views of nihilism and eternalism. You'll be freed from the bondage. And then at the end, up to this, Tsongkhapa has finished with the teaching on the 3 principal aspects of the path, the actual teaching on them. And then the verse number 14 is, of course, directly addressed to Tsago Umbung Awan Chakpa, but indirectly he is also instructing us. He says, child, once you have realized the points of the three principles of the path, seek solitude and cultivate strong determination and quickly reach the final goal. So if I teach these three principles of the path to others and not really practice myself, then I would be like Lama Mani. In the Tibetan society, there are some people who goes around to people to describe about hell and so forth based on Thangpas. So it would be like that. So it's not just to be babbling out words to others, but Lama Tsongkhapas says, once you have understood these 3 points, then you should seek solitude and cultivate strong determination or the strength of effort. And so, having gone through the study and then reflection, and when you are able to experience the emptiness, for example, your mind should be able to stay on the object rather single-pointedly without distraction. So this has to come through training your mind, familiarizing with the object of meditation. So for that, I mean, what you need to develop is concentration, single-pointed concentration. And therefore, he says, gain the strength of, or build the strength of effort, and quickly reach the final goal. And so, having studied the text, what you should also go through are the 4 reasonings or 4 principles to gain conviction in the meaning of the teachings. Then you have gained what is known as the true conviction, or the wisdom of arising through reflection. And then you have to also meditate what you have found conviction in. So when it comes to actually meditation, then for most of us, we have to say, I'm sorry, goodbye to meditation, because we are not really able to do well in this. So this is something we lack. So we still have some time. So in the do you have the text? So in the Destiny Fulfilled, Tsongkhapas says that people say that there are 2 false teachings of the Buddha, Sutra and Tantra is higher than them, but then they do not try to ask how Tantra is actually the more profound. So Tsongkhapas says that one has to, of course, you have to search for it, and then, of course, in order to meditate, you have to search for the teaching, and then, in order to do that, you have to listen to the teaching, and so you have to build up the wisdoms of that arises through study, reflection, and meditation. So have this strong determination to liberate all sentient beings from samsara, from the suffering and its causes. And so, with the help of bodhicitta, to achieve enlightenment, Buddhahood, the omniscient state, which has to come through dependent on causes and conditions. There's no Buddhahood which does not come through causes and conditions. So of course there are other qualities within the Buddha which are not composite. So even the compounded phenomenon or qualities of the Buddha are sometimes termed as being permanent because in Abhisamaya Alamkara, it says that the enlightened activities of the Buddha are rather permanent because they never cease. And similarly, the wisdom mind of the Buddha is sometimes also termed as being non-composite phenomena. So they have their own meaning, the contextual meaning. So we cannot say that the mind is not composite phenomena as such. It's really like that. If you say that, it shows your ignorance. And so just as we have body, speech, and mind in the state of Buddhahood, Buddhas also have these three, the holy body, speech, and mind. So these three are composite phenomena. And then in the highest Yoga Tantra, says that this mind, which has the nature of clarity and awareness, if you go further into the nature of it, I mean, its deepest nature is that of clear light or luminosity. And so it is even termed in the Vajra Pinnacle Tantra as being the sattva, the hero, which is without beginning nor end. So this clear light, innate clear light, has to become the omniscient mind. You cannot eliminate it and then attain omniscient mind of a Buddha. So that mind has the qualities of being aware and clear. And so this has to come through this clear light nature of our mind. So we need to overcome the defilements which cover it. So the means to do so. So you have to first. There are two ways to do it. First is to overcome the hindrances, obstacles to. For example, when you cultivate compassion, you develop it through the meditation on equalizing and changing others with others, and then you also have to get rid of the obstacles to cultivation of compassion, which are those of anger and so forth. And so the defilements that are on mind have to be, on the one hand, overcome. And then you also have to cultivate the conducive conditions to attain the omniscient mind. Of course, the basic condition is there in the mind, in our mind. So the body, speech, and mind at the resultant state of Buddhahood. So the reason why we need to become a Buddha is to help other sentient beings limitlessly, infinitely, and in accordance with the needs of them. So with this omniscient mind, which sees everything clearly, without any veil, I mean, if a Buddha were not to be able to be where the sentient beings need them, for example, even if their mind may be somewhere, but if their body doesn't reach there, then they may not be able to help others. And then similarly, if their mind is somewhere but not the speech, I mean, it's not. They are not going to be able to serve others. And so, these three, the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha, have to be together where they need to help others. And so, these three secrets, as they're called, have to be of one taste. So this has to be achieved through this mind that we have. Of course, this body cannot become a Buddha's body. This speech we have now cannot become speech of the Buddha. But slightly subtler form of body and speech cannot also become the Buddha's body and speech. And therefore, even our subtle body, speech, and mind may not be of one taste. Although it's sometimes said they are of one nature, but then they cannot be of some. They are not of one taste, and therefore you have to think about the subtlest body, speech, and mind, which comes down to the subtlest clear light and the wind energy. And so these two, the subtlest mind and the wind energy, which are of one taste or one nature, on the basis of it, we have the potential, of course, on the basis of which we have the potential for attaining the four Buddha bodies. The enlightened body of the enlightened activities of the Buddhas always radiate, and the emptiness of mind of sentient beings and Buddhas are not of different nature. As Maitreya says in the Mahayana Uttara Tantra, the seventh Dalai Lama also mentions it refers to the suchness of the mind or the emptiness of the mind, which are still defiled. So, which is also taught in Abhisamaya Alamkara. So in Abhisamaya Alamkara, it also says there is no difference between the emptiness of the mind of sentient beings and the mind of Buddhas. And then he talks about the activity of the enlightened activities of the Buddha. And then the seventh Dalai Lama also mentions a third factor, which he calls the substantial seed for attaining the three bodies of a Buddha. So the subtlest mind and the wind energy are of same nature or essence. So on the basis of that, these have the these are like the similar condition or cause similar to the mind and the speech and the body of a Buddha. So the subtlest mind or innate clear light is this the substantial cause or the seed for the enlightened mind of a Buddha, and then this subtlest wind energy becomes the substantial cause for the body of a Buddha and also the speech. So we have to develop this the indivisibility of the three the body, speech, and mind while we train on the path, and through that, we can finally reach the body, speech, and mind of a Buddha, which are of one taste. Sorry. So what we need to attain is the illusory body. So in Tantra, it is said that we have to meditate or visualize the four things which are there in the resultant state of a Buddha. So when we train on the path, and somebody's on the path, what we're trying to do is to develop these body, speech, and minds as being of one taste, so that in the resultant state we are able to actually attain this. And then we also have the visualization of deities, which is meditation on a similar aspect of a body that is there in the resultant state as well. And then we also meditate on the emptiness, and so a direct realization of emptiness becomes the causal factor for the omniscient mind itself. Of course, in the Sutrayana also this is taught, but then the path that is developed according to the Sutrayana path is not the same as that which you develop through the tantric path, and therefore the path that you develop through the Sutrayana path are kind of contrived, I mean, through different causes and conditions, whereas when you go into Tantra, you actually dissolve the gross levels of mind and then actualize the subtle innate mind, and which can actually become the substantial cause of a Buddha's omniscient mind. And so in order to go into the completion stage practice of the Tantra, then you also have the generation stage practice. So you visualize yourself as a deity, and where you also imagine the body, speech, and mind of yourself as being, I mean, this as a deity being of same nature and taste. So in order to rise into a deity, you need to meditate on emptiness and dissolve yourself completely, and then this mind, the wisdom realizing emptiness, has to transform into the body of a deity. And so you are kind of training to lay out the map for Buddhahood, the path to Buddhahood. And so what we have to overcome are the appearance of oneself as being ordinary, as well as there is this appearance of oneself as being truly existent. And so in order to overcome these, you meditate on emptiness. And so this meditation, the mind which is absorbed in emptiness, arises in the form of a deity. And so you have to reduce the impact of this appearance of things having some independent existence. So in the lower tantras, yoga tantra and below, of course you have practices where you actually visualize the things which are in the resultant state, but then there is no path which actually purifies the basis. Whereas in the highest yoga tantra, there is both. For example, in the highest yoga tantra, you have taking the clear light state into, or purifying the clear light, I mean, of death state into dharmakaya. And so the basic death at the basis level is the clear light mind, which goes up to Buddhahood, Buddha's mind. And so, so for somebody who has taken birth in a womb, then we're talking about the next stage, which is that of transforming or taking the Bharto, the intermediate state, into the Sambhogakaya, which is. And then when the Bharto stops and somebody takes rebirth in a womb, And then that is taken as the basis level Nirmanakaya. So even at the time of doing generation stage practice of Tantra, you are using these means to purify or transform the death, intermediate, and the rebirth states into the three bodies of Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya. So there's the means of purifying or overcoming the death, intermediate, and the rebirth state, even at the basis level. Of course, the real development of the three kayas of a Buddha comes in the completion stage practice. So, because you have to have appear into a deity, arise into a deity from within your meditation on emptiness, where the mind that meditates on emptiness transforms into a deity, you have to have understanding of emptiness. Otherwise, you may recite the sadhana, say everything dissolves into emptiness, and then from the emptiness I arise into a deity. But without understanding of emptiness, it will not really serve as an antidote to overcome the clinging to true existence of things. So in one of the tantric texts, it is said that there is no other cause than clinging to the conception which clings to oneself as being ordinary, which leads to samsara. So this a conception of believing in true existence of things as having some true existence that serves as cause for us to bind in samsara. So there is a question raised by somebody in text. Because samsara is brought about by clinging to true existence, how can visualization of a deity, oneself visualized as a deity, can actually serve as antidote to it? And therefore, one has to understand that first you have to bring up the conviction or understanding of emptiness. And then, from within that emptiness, you arise into a deity. And when you are in the form of a deity, visualized in the form of a deity, then what you have to do is look at your, reflect on yourself as a deity, as well as, while doing that, you actually meditate on emptiness of the deity itself. So the answer that this master gives is that there is meditation on emptiness even in Tantra. So in that case, even if you have meditation on emptiness, which serves as an antidote to overcome the clinging to true existence, then why is there the need for meditation on emptiness? You can just meditate your body, yourself as a deity. He only says he forgot what he wanted to say. I can't remember. So let's stop. Perhaps I'm feeling hungry. I've forgotten what I wanted to say. Perhaps when I'm full, perhaps I may remember. Kusum to Shinyaling Sap. So His Holiness is asking somebody what he was actually talking about.
다 재밌다.
Kusum tu
야,
jingeli chak.
다가다 도스는 상황이잖아.
So if you reflect in this way, as I said yesterday, if Mahayana is not a teaching of the Buddha, then Buddha appeared in India 2,600 years ago. And then in the earlier part of his life, he was said to be a sentient being, and then he became a Buddha. And it is also said that he actually went through the accumulation of merit and wisdom for over 3 countless eons. But then he became enlightened at the age of 35, and then for the rest of his life he gave teaching only for about 40 something years. Having gone through so much strenuous effort and practice and all that over so long time, then we have to say that he only was able to help sentient beings with having created such a powerful cause. I mean, if he was able to help sentient beings only for 40 something years, then that doesn't really become logical. So Nagarjuna says that only through the 37 harmonies of enlightenment you cannot become omniscient. So there is a difference between the attainment of Buddhahood and Arhatship. Even the lower schools of Tenet, the Shravakas and so forth, do accept it. So Nagarjuna is drawing this contradiction between the. So usually I tell this story also. One Korean professor came to me telling me that he was writing a life story of the Buddha Shakyamuni, and as a model for that, His Holiness, he said he was using His Holiness himself, His Holiness Dalai Lama, as the his model, or he's comparing Buddha's life to him. So I said, how can you do that? I'm just a simple monk. Buddha actually went through 3 countless eons to accumulate merit and wisdom. You cannot compare him with me. So I then explained to him about the 4 Buddha bodies. So the historical Buddha who appeared in India, people usually look at him as being a very intelligent person and a very kind and compassionate one. So if we have to just believe in a Buddha in just having these qualities as a human being, of course, it's not so sufficient etiquette. And therefore, if you understand the 4 kayas of a body, 4 Buddha bodies, then you can talk about the Nirmana kaya, which is the emanation body, this manifestation body of a Buddha. Of course, so the Buddha who came to India 2,600 years ago was a supreme manifestation body of a Buddha. And so I explained this to the Korean, and the Buddha himself, who came to India 2,600 years ago, actually was already enlightened long time back. And so if you understand the 4 Buddha bodies, of course, these come through causes and conditions. The Buddhahood comes through causes and conditions. Now, when you talk about coming through causes and conditions, you have to actually explain it on the basis of this mind that we have. And this can be done if you understand how it is actually explained in the highest Yoga Tantra. And you'll be able to bring the relationship between the cause and effects, which finally leads to that Buddha's mind and so forth. And so, otherwise, in the Sutrayana, there is, of course, talk about the mental body of bodhisattvas, high-level bodhisattvas, and then they'll also talk about the potency left by, or the latent potency of the ignorance becoming the cause of Buddha, which doesn't really which is not really logical. So therefore, you have to understand what is presented in the highest Yoga Tantra with regard to the four Buddha bodies. And then, if you can also reflect that these Buddha bodies can actually be visualized at this time, and therefore take the Buddha bodies, the resultant states, into the path, I mean, it will make sense. And so the four Buddha bodies mainly come through the three mixings at the time of death, and these in turn can be inferred when you understand the three mixings at the time of sleep. So when you are awake, if you are able to meditate on or show real strong mindfulness about these dissolution processes, of course, then when you actually go into sleep, and before you go into deep sleep, of course, there is this the process of dissolution, which you may be able to recognize rather roughly in the beginning. And then you can also use this, the dream state and take that into the path as well. And so it is said that in the Kalachakra Tantra, that even if somebody jokingly kind of meditates on this, what is known as the body of empty form, I mean, there will be the case that such a person can attain this in the end. And so, of course, when you are able to, sometimes you are able to recognize dreams as dreams. So it happens. So being able to recognize dream as dream, and then using that state to develop that path. And then when you dream, when you use that further to actually actualize that of the clear-light nature of the mind, these are something really we can do if we put effort. We lack effort. And so through that we can actually develop the three mixings at the time of waking state. So in the secret biography of Lama Tsongkhapa, it is said that Tsongkhapa had this dream in which he saw Budun Rinchen Trub sitting on a jewel-decked throne, and Budun Rinchen Trub touching Lama Tsongkhapa's head with scripture, which is the scripture of Guhya Samaja. And so we'll stop here. So I hope you got some understanding of the profundity of Tantra. So of all the Tantras, the highest Yoga Tantra is the most profound, within which there are the mother Tantras and the father Tantras. And then sometimes there's also a third category, they are called non-dual Tantra, as Gongtang Tenpe Dweme also says. He says those which show the So tantras, which emphasizes mainly the secret initiation, are father tantra. Those which emphasize the wisdom knowledge are mother tantras, and then the emphasize those tantras which emphasize the word initiation are called the non-dual. So these three initiations are the initiations for maturing our mind for the completion stage practices. So he says this explanation is something really amazing. So he's not rejecting this kind of explanation. So the followers of Kalachakra Tantra are called Kalachakra as non-dual Tantra, and then in the Sakya tradition, the Hevajra Tantra is called non-dual Tantra. But Lama Tsongkhapa Tsongkhapas says that some of those who make this division of the highest yoga tantra into father, mother, and non-dual tantras do so on the basis of explanation that the So they make this distinction on the basis of mainly focusing on the deity yoga, and mainly focusing on the bliss, and then mainly focusing on the non-duality of bliss and emptiness. So this kind of interpretations, Lama Tsongkhapa found not really authentic. This, he says, shows that people who are obsessed or who have attachment to the certain tantras which they actually identify with say such things. So what is explained by Gungtang Tempe Drömen could make sense. Phrase that's spoken by the Bhagavan.
Yılgın töksün ürüsün, iyice zerrek olsun de, nasıl tökse şaradıvatin kövün, bolun bacısa tamma hasatı, kodukten öder teris pişirte, hamık töksün nökütlerin, bolun tengir kömün, asuri, kandarva, seyte yırtımcı basılsın, yılgın töksün ürüsüne zerrek ilerge maktı. Yılgın töksün ürüsün birgin içinde kösüne zürkün gidik, iki kölgüne soğuduruz doğusu. Vay. 맞아.
I bow down to the mother of the conquerors of the three times, the perfect in wisdom, inexpressible by words and thoughts, which is unproduced and ceased like the entity of the sky, the object of wisdom, of unique knowledge. That yatam gate gate, para gate, para sangate, bodhis. Gate para gate, para sangate, bodhis, swaha. The salutation verse from Abhisamaya Alankara by Maitreya: by the knower of all, hearers seeking pacification are led to peace. By the knower of paths, those benefiting migrating beings accomplish the welfare of the world. By the perfect possession of it, the subduers teach the varieties possessing all aspects to these mothers of the Buddha, together with those of hearers and bodhisattvas. Homage. Salutation verse from Nagarjuna's Muddhammadhyamaka Karika: he who taught dependent origination, no cessation and no origination, no annihilation, no permanence, no coming, no going, neither different, no same. This thought calming of the conceptions and elaborations to you, who is supreme speaker among all fully enlightened Buddhas, I pay homage. Let's say the words of taking refuge and bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. By the accumulations of merit and wisdom, I create. Through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Two more times. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. By the accumulations of merit and wisdom I create. Through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I pay homage. So the kind and skillful master, Buddha, who appeared in India and turned the wheel of Dharma, gave his teachings around 2,600 years ago. Now we are in the 21st century. So in this 21st century, places where Buddhism had not spread in the past, where people are educated and are taking interest in Buddhism, generally people who are rather not interested in religion also have taken interest in Buddhism and has actually praised Buddhism. Even Einstein himself, he has praised Buddhism. He said that in the future, if there is any religion which can go together with parallel with science, it would be Buddhism. So this is what he had said. So this seems to be true. Towards at the end of the 20th century and now in the beginning of the 21st century, through science and technology, people have now paid attention. So today the Heart Sutra will be recited in Kalmykia language. Kalmyk. Oh, she's not here. Oh. So according to the Tibetan lunar calendar, as I said yesterday, today is the death anniversary of Tsongkhapas. And so all the followers of different traditions of Tibetan Buddhism, mainly the followers of Tsongkhapas himself, the people of the Gyaluk tradition, do make offerings, pujas today. And so in Kalmyk, this day is actually considered as the New Year. And so this 25th day of the 10th Tibetan month for Kalmykians are their New Year. So I would like to greet you all and say Happy New Year to you all for the Kalmykians. So it's been rather coincidental here that the Kalmykians are going to recite the Heart Sutra in their language. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time the Bhagwan was dwelling on the mass of Vulture Mountain in Rajagriha together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagwan was absorbed in the concentration on the category of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra. Likewise, all phenomena are empty, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I elements, and so on up to and including no mind elements, no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment, Shariputra. Therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared: Tat yatha om gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhi swaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, in the profound perfection of wisdom, train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagwan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying: well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagwan having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharadvatiputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety along with the world of gods, humans, Asuras, and Gandharvas were overjoyed and highly praised. His Holiness is saying that people who have never had Tibetan butter tea, they call it soup when in Tibet. When people Tibetans give it to them, it's called soup. So Tsongkhapas says in the three principal aspects of the path, by reflecting on the rarity of finding human life, and also understanding that this life is, there's no way we can actually lose time. And similarly, in the Sakya tradition, they say if you are attached to this life, then you are not a religious person. If you create karmas that would lead you to lower realms of existence in the next life, then you'll always have suffering. So rather than doing that, if you create the 10 virtuous actions, if you create the 10 non-virtuous actions of killing and so forth, then you are actually creating karma for lower realms of existence. And whereas if you create the 10 virtuous actions, then you create the karma for higher realms of existence, such as human life. And even if you may have again a human rebirth or higher rebirth in the next life, but still, because you are still in samsara, we are rather under the sway of our negative thoughts and emotions. And so we are almost like swayed by the negative thoughts and emotions, but we are not able to see the shortcomings of these negative thoughts and emotions, and we voluntarily kind of indulge ourselves in these, such as paying attention to the mind and workings of the mind, and different states of mind and thought processes, which can also have which affect our health. Therefore, for our health, people's health in this life, also happiness and welfare of sentient family members as well as in society, and so people have taken really real interest in tackling the problems that are there. So Buddhism mainly is not just based on blind faith, but it looks for the reality of things. So this is how Buddhism goes about. So with regard to searching for reality, of course, there is through science, of course, people have been able to explain the very subtle particles, as well as neurons, very subtle particles of the brain cells. So these have come through experiment, research, and analysis, investigation. So similarly, with regard to the work is the system of mind, with regard to psychology and system of mind, the modern science is rather like very at a very beginner's sort of stage. So scientists so far have been checking into the external objects and not so much into the internal world of the mind. And then when they take interest in the internal world of the mind, so they find that the most extensive explanation of mind and its working system of the mind and so forth are found in the Indian tradition. Because we talk about in the Indian tradition, we talk about the development of concentration, single-pointed concentration, and because of that, you also have various degrees of presentation of various degrees of subtlety of mind. And so, with regard to psychology and the system of working of the mind, it is found more extensively in the Indian Buddhist, Indian thought, as particularly Buddhist thought. And so people are really taking some new interest in these systems. So it's places where Buddhism had not spread in the past. When people are taking interest in Buddhism, with regard to us who are traditionally Buddhist, we should study and be able to know what our faith actually teaches. And thereby we should be able to follow the view, the philosophical view and the conduct as it is taught in the teaching of the Buddha, and be able to follow the message of Buddha as accordingly. So without doing this, without studying and practicing, I mean, so we should be able to show the example to other people through our own practice and through our body, speech, and mind of the teaching of the Buddha, which we are supposed to be professing, to be following it. So otherwise, people would say, "Oh, people who say they are Buddhists, I mean, they're not really. There's nothing much they can say about what their own teaching, and so this is not good." And so we, as traditional Buddhists, should be able to recognize the treasure that we have, the cultural heritage and treasure. So when we talk about spirituality or religion, it's not about having some temple and visiting temple and so forth, but it has to be internalized within ourselves. What we study and contemplate has to be we should be able to put effort in studying. So the Buddhist republics of the Russian Federation, 3 of them, from these three republics, people have come, and so I'm giving an introductory teaching on Buddhism. And then there are more Tibetans from Tibet. So as I said till yesterday, I started teaching the 3 principles of the aspects of the path. So regarding the liberation, it has to come about through the practice of and cultivation of renunciation. So although our goal is liberation, what we need is use our intelligence and wisdom and meditate or gain insight into the reality of things, emptiness. So this is we have to combine single-pointed concentration and vipassana together, and therefore we need to cultivate wisdom. So wisdom here particularly refers to the wisdom realizing selflessness. And so that is about the training of the wisdom. In order to have that, we need single-pointed concentration. Right now, our mind is rather distracted through excitement and also laxity and so forth, the different distractions outside. We are not able to stay on our object. Even if we meditate on emptiness or selflessness, we are not able to focus continuously, but we get easily distracted. It's like trying to make fire, but not being able to actually, just being able to start the fire, but not being able to ignite the thing fully. And so what we need is this concentration, single-pointedly focusing on what we are meditating on. And therefore, through that, what we can build is the power of concentration. Otherwise, our mind is always going off and on from the focus. Therefore, it is important to develop single-pointed concentration, which is also called the training of concentration. In order to be successful in this, we need mindfulness and introspection or vigilance. Now, this starts with the practice of morality, the training of morality. The subtle distraction and excitement can be recognized when we reach a subtler level of mind. So through the development of mindfulness and introspection, as your introspection and mindfulness gains strength more and more, then you'll be able to develop concentration, single-pointed concentration, where you'll be able to also, in the process of it, you'll be able to overcome through mindfulness introspection, those of the subtle excitement and mental excitement and laxity. So this is how we should proceed, building up from morality to concentration to wisdom. And so we have, in order to be able to analyze things, we need, with intelligence, we need this human mind. Animals do not have this potential. So although our goal is liberation, but we need also the human life, to have a human body, a human life, in order to be able to progress along the path.